All right, we're back. Mic check 1 2 1 2. See if my mic volume is up. Um, mic check 1 2 1 2. If anybody can hear me in the chat, just push one. I think there may be a delay here. Let me see. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anybody can hear me in the chat, just push one. All right, so we're live. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 280, Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. And make sure you check out the community page as well. D Felder, what's going on? Steep Technologies, thank you for the one. What's going on? Terrence Forrest, what's going on? Yeah, tonight, Brooklyn Star, what's going on? Good evening to you. Tonight is Hong Kong's crisis and the coming war on China. If you have not watched John Pilger's documentary on the coming war on China, this is going to be very foreign to you. You have to watch that documentary to really understand what we're going to be talking about tonight, because it's very critical. He did that documentary a couple years ago, but all of what he's saying is relevant to what's happening right now, or what he has said is relevant to what's happening right now. So um, the amount of research that went into this is very lengthy and very good, deep analysis that was brought with that. So I'm hoping that Scholar Chang shows up. I know he just emailed me, so if you're going to join the panel, make sure you raise your hand, or else I won't be able to see you. So to add you to the panel. We had a good hangout last night. Shout out to MOT. Shout out to everybody who was on the panel last night. Dr. Phoenix, Complex Design, Super Triz, Paul B, the original Old Man, the Wacky World of O. Definitely had a butter laid panel last night for open chat number 16. So Let me see if anybody's trying to join. No, no one's trying to join right now. So let me first give it like a small backstory as to what's going on with this Hong Kong situation. So there was an individual from Hong Kong who went to Taiwan, Taipei, Taiwan, with a female. I believe she was a single mother or something to that effect. I think she was a girl. She was the girlfriend of this individual male. They traveled to Taiwan, and she ended up dying. She was murdered. And this person from Hong Kong flew back from Taiwan to Hong Kong and was wanted um, for arrest on this, and which led to the investigation of this. The mainland of China, which is Beijing, extradited this person from Hong Kong, and the citizens of Hong Kong did not like that. Allegedly, they did not like that, and that's what's sparking the protest, because the idea of extradition is foreign to them, because the residents there are under the impression that they are independent of the Chinese mainland government. It will be the equivalent of catching a not to say catching a body, that's too much slang. Murdering somebody in Puerto Rico and then being upset that the Washington D.C. the Federal Bureau of Investigation decided to bring you back from Puerto Rico to the mainland of the United States. Very close equivalent to what that would be here. Puerto Rico is a commonwealth, the United States, for those of you who don't know and don't understand this. China has a two-state, one policy sort of deal. And soon in the future, in the coming future, it will be one state. There will be no two states. So that's what's leading to all of these protests. Now, how does that work in regards to democracy? Well, there is no democracy in China. They don't believe in it. You have the ability to think for yourself, but you do not have the ability to criticize the government, and nor do you have the ability to change policy on the ground. That's not how it works. It's not how their political system works. You can make all the money you want. You can drive all the fast cars you want. You can, buy whatever house you want. But at the end of the day, the Communist Party rule is the rule of the day. That works for them. So no criticism from me. How this works. Hey, what's going on, Complex Design? And Willie Little John, what's going on? Yeah. So how this works, for Hong Kong citizens, they don't see it that way. They see it as we're separate from China. We get to do whatever we want. Hong Kong was born out of the colonialism from the British. So it was under British rule for over 100 years, and was returned to the mainland of China in 1997. So the British exit from Hong Kong is similar to the British exit of the colonial states in Africa on the continent, as well as in the Caribbean. The British, for whatever reason, still seem to have some form of influence in those areas, maybe because of they left their imprint, their political imprint in those areas. And a lot of people are starting to throw up the British flag, the old colonialist flag from prior to China taking control of those areas. Hey, what's going on, Complex Design?
Mike, what's good, man?
I'm chilling, bro. What's going on with you?
Nothing much, man. Just getting in here for another one.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so that's what's leading to these protests. China. Hong Kong is a very compact and compressed um state, for that matter. It's the equivalent of New York City. So there's a lot of you know, they had their own economy, for that matter. So they were pretty um pretty much sustainable on their own. Now, with that being said, their economy has actually dwindled the last 10 years or so, I think, since the economic crisis. They survived the 1998 crisis, 1999 crisis, but this time around, they have not been relevant in the global markets. They do have a very strong um, human capital power and human resource power, but they do not contribute to the Chinese main ecosystem as much as they used to. So they're not even that relevant anymore. They're kind of just spinning on their own top for the most part. You have anything you want to add to this, Complex? I know I'm waiting for Scarlett Chang to come on.
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for. Waiting to see what Scholar Cheng has to say about these things. Get his insights on this. I mean, it's important to note too that a lot of what we're hearing in terms of
Mhm.
um, the the unrest that's going on in Hong Kong
Mhm.
and what have you is actually being, let's say, manipulated by MI6 and the CIA. Now, this is interesting coming from China, given all of the things that are going on between the U.S. Um, and that particular country there with regards to trade wars and other things of the like. So there's a multitude of angles, right, like taking place here. I would I would I would co-sign on some of that, some of those fires that are being stoked, being the workings of some clandestine um, entities. I would say that it's also some of the desires of the Hong Kong people to remain independent, and then there's also the part that China plays, where they've been moving to bring Hong Kong back into the fold, to the mainland fold for some time now.
Mhm.
So there's a multitude of angles actually being played out here all at the same time.
Yeah, Hong Kong was or is still a business clearinghouse
Hmm.
for the most part for the British or for
Yep.
British colonialism, and that's where they get a lot. That's where they got a lot of their wealth from. Um, because those financial markets traveled right through there. Even to this very day, the
Yeah,
market is
yeah, I
still
was gonna say still today. Yeah.
it still it still sees Hong Kong as relevant. But in terms of um, contributions to the Chinese mainland, China is pretty much spending their own economy. The manufacturing powerhouse of the world, as well as a lot of innovation coming out of China. So
Hmm.
Hong Kong, for that matter, isn't really relevant. Their economy is not really relevant to China's mainland economy. So I say all that to say this: that a lot of these people who are protesting are actually millennials. They have a very strong millennial population down there.
That's who you mostly see out here in these protests.
Right.
You know.
Now, um, you have protests happening everywhere now. You have the yellow vest protest that's going on 49 weeks over in France. You
Hmm.
have um, the protests in Puerto Rico recently that brought down the governor
Right.
of Puerto Rico.
and his replacement. As soon as
Right.
they said who was going to replace him, I can't remember the chick's name. They was like, nah, man, we're about to set this shit off again.
Hmm.
So, I think that's still up in the air right about now over in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, everybody who's in line to be the governor, the new governor of Puerto Rico, are all corrupt. Because
Yeah,
they're
they're all attached to the corruption. Yeah.
right. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with Puerto Rico. But these protests that are happening, um, one could argue that they have outside influence. But when you think about what's happening in Hong Kong's location is very relevant to a discussion
Hmm.
because it's the underbelly, the soft underbelly of the mainland of China. When you think about what happened a couple of years ago in the Ukraine, the Maidan protests
Yep.
had an uprising of people who wanted to throw out Yanukovych based on allegations of corruption that was genuine up until you had rogue entities enter the protests, and you had Victoria Nuland, who is a U.S. State Department advisor, or I forget her role in the State Department, basically on the streets of Ukraine, in Kiev, Ukraine, handing out chocolate chip cookies to the terrorists.
Yeah, I remember that.
And she had a phone call with um, another colleague who was sitting in Germany at the time, talking about how they were going to bring down the Ukrainian government and overthrow it and actually place their own person in power. This is on record.
Yeah, and that was largely to stave off any sort of pacts or any sort of friendly talks or negotiations with Russia.
Well, Ukraine applied for EU citizenship or membership, and they also applied to join NATO.
Yep.
Putin, president of the Russian Federation, said that if the Ukraine joins NATO, all bets are off the table. That is a declaration of war, and they will go in there and solve that problem themselves.
Because the U.S. was literally angling to stick a missile defense system right there, pointed right at Russia, like, "Yo, like, you think we really gonna let this shit happen?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, if I mean, yeah, you guys become part of NATO. U.S. sticks up. Like, how else are they supposed to take that?
Right. So that was the whole purpose of overthrowing the Ukrainian government that was in power at the time, was to actually bring Ukraine closer to the EU and NATO. The problem is that the EU, the member states, are like, why do we need Ukraine? It's a basket case. It doesn't have an economy, and it's infested with all types of debt. Why would we take on a declining state, or a state that's in decline, just to spite Russians? I don't understand the point to that, right? So that's the way how they look at it. So when you start talking about Hong Kong, you start taking into consideration that China's a rising power, but you have a rising power with that's walking around barefoot on hot coals, which would be Hong Kong. Kind of hard to maintain your balance there, because you're standing on hot coals.
Yeah.
So this is very important, because this is going to affect global markets, because Hong Kong is still relevant in global markets.
And we got to understand too that the British just sold them like $2.2 billion in arms.
No,
No, that didn't happen.
you said about who?
The British. The British is arming. I read something just not too long ago about, or maybe there was a deal on the table to buy an arms deal to buy weapons from the British to the tune of like 2.2 billion or something like that.
If you find the article, bring it up.
Yeah, let me find it. Oh, my bad. No, Taiwan. That's Taiwan.
Yeah.
Taiwan.
Daddy,
Yes, baby.
what do you want to eat today for your dinner?
I don't know. What do you want?
I mean, the refrigerator.
So this is what's going on, and a lot of people are not taking into consideration that this is serious business. Let me see if there's anything in the chat right now. Steve Scott Chang is here. He emailed me just before the hangout started. So
Okay.
Yeah. Brooklyn Star says that arrests were made at the protest yesterday and the ages were 17 to 28. Yeah, there's some millennials out there. They're the only ones who are going to have that sort of fight in them. I don't think the older generation really care too much, but I'm not going to show the pictures here, but there are some very grotesque pictures of people losing limbs, being trampled on, losing eyes and ears.
Yeah, I ain't seen all those, man.
Oh man, it's horrific, man. It is horrific. People losing fingers.
Yeah, not trying to see that.
Yeah, they've have a lot of improvised weapons and stuff that they've developed. You know, hockey sticks and baseball bats with nails in them, and you know, what do you call it? They're using
cocktails.
Molotov cocktail bombs are being found. 9mm and semi-automatic weapons are being found. Where did they get all these? Where did they get these caches of armaments, as well as you know, what do they hope to gain from this? Because it's interesting to see them. You know, it's one thing in the United States if Black people are fighting for civil rights. That makes sense because they're citizens of the state and they're endowed with these sort of civil rights. But when it comes to Hong Kong, I don't think the Chinese government has the stomach to be giving you some form of democracy when they don't have democracy themselves.
And I mean that, but I think that's where that's where the level of violence in these in these protests is taking place, because I don't think citizens of Hong Kong have a desire to fall under any sort of yoke of the Chinese to that extent. I mean, Hong Kong has largely enjoyed more of a Western existence, in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so to kind of in their minds revert or to move into more of a totalitarian sort of setup, it would be like it's like the resistance that you get from like Trump supporters, dude, like with at the thought of Bernie Sanders becoming president, but magnify that times 10, times 20. They're not trying to live in some sort of socialist or dare we say communist type of social setting, right? That's not typically what we would attribute to the American way of life. In Hong Kong, people don't contextualize the way they live in much the same way that the Chinese do, like in mainland China. It's a different existence, in Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they take it as like there would be like a fundamental change that would happen, and not for the good if they were to fully fall under Chinese influence.
Mm-hmm. That's what they perceive, but the reality is, China doesn't doesn't play when it comes to corruption. So when you talk about corruption, you're talking about people, falsifying documents for taxation purposes and so on and so forth. They don't like that. They're very strict about that that type of stuff. In Russia and China, any of these sort of authoritarian states, if you rob the government, There are consequences for that.
Yeah, it is like, dude, they're taking you out.
Yeah, yeah. Even the same thing in in Islamic states, in Iran and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and stuff like that. You get caught. I mean, we just saw last year with MBS go after all of these Emirates and princes and not princes, all
Like
these other
shit.
business Islamic businessmen who
Mhm.
were allegedly taking bribes and doing a lot of shady things financially.
Yeah, a lot of them in jail right now.
Yeah, they're either in jail or some of them have been killed.
They've been killed. Yeah, but like, so ones that are in jail, they in there for a good minute.
Hmm. Yeah, so Hong Kong is looking at this and saying we don't want that, but you wouldn't have that if you just were playing honest, right? So you shouldn't have
But
to
I
worry
mean, but
about
how do you? But you, how you gonna? How you gonna play? How you gonna play honest under like British influence though? So that's the thing.
it. Well, the British have been greasing their palms for so long.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like there's a it was that it's kind of like an out of sight, out of mind type of thing, right? Like if you kind of vicariously benefit, the British say, look, we're gonna we're gonna do our thing over here. Um, don't mind us, right?
Hmm.
Like just y'all straight, just don't mind us, and it becomes like a thing where it's like you turn what they say, turn a blind eye to it.
Hmm.
But when you got somebody who's going to come in with a system full of checks and balances, I mean, we talking full facial recognition software and what do they call it?
Drones,
What do they call it? Social what's that? What's the
social
term?
credit score.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that basically nullifies certain people from moving around. You
right.
can't ride certain trains. You can't be out at a certain time. You can't go into certain districts and things of that nature. You can't open up bank accounts and stuff like that. So, um,
You got to
the
do all your money transferring in your social media through what is it, WeChat?
yeah, WeChat.
You know what I mean? Like, dude, that's they looking at that type of existence and they're like, hell no.
Hmm. So, yeah, Scholar Chain's not here yet, so
Okay.
I don't know if
Yeah.
we'll go forward with this with 30 minutes in. So let
Yeah.
me share my screen.
Just like, and as a side, man, while you're doing that, I've heard some people say that about Andrew Yang, the dude who's running for president,
Hmm.
Democrat. That he would like on the low usher in that same type of social setting here in the United States if he became president. I'm like, that's a bit of a stretch, but
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, people kind of have that whole thing in mind. But if you really listen to that dude, man, he's Silicon Valley dude. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, I think he's been endorsed by Uber or Lyft, one of the two
yeah,
ride.
yeah, he's big tech is behind him on the
Yeah,
low, on the low.
yeah. All right, let me start with this. This one is from RT.com. Beijing denies Hong Kong port visits by two U.S. warships amid ongoing unrest. China has rejected the U.S. Navy's request for two of its ships to dock in Hong Kong as massive anti-government protests continue in the city. China has denied requests for port visits to Hong Kong by the USS Lake Erie guided missile cruiser and the USS Green Bay amphibious transport dock. Commander Nate Christensen, the deputy spokesperson for the U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet, said on Tuesday. Christensen did not specify why Beijing rejected the request, adding only that he expects the port visits to continue in the future. This comes amid large-scale anti-government protests in Hong Kong, which have been raging for the 10 consecutive weeks and led to clashes with police. The rallies were first sparked by the now suspended controversial extradition bill and later grew to include demands for wider political reform. Officials in Beijing promised a swift response to rioting and violence in Hong Kong. They also stressed that China will not allow any foreign power to encourage protesters to break the law. Some US politicians, like Speaker of the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, have openly voiced their support for the protests. Chinese, excuse me, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Huai Chunying said that their words serve as powerful evidence of the country's involvement in the unrest. So I want to make this point. Mitch McConnell, which is a interesting character, is married to a Chinese woman
He sure is.
Who's a U.S. politician, who she herself has connections with the Chinese mainland government, who they themselves, as a married couple, have received millions of dollars in funds from the Chinese mainland government. Put that in your pipe for 1 second before you even smoke it, or actually put that in your bong, and think for a second, who does Mitch McConnell really think he is to support anything like this? Because what would happen if people showed up in Washington, D.C. demanding that their student loans be forgiven? And they didn't just show up, empty-handed. They showed up with baseball bats and all types of foreign objects that will be classified as, not, not acceptable for boarding the plane. How would the United States government and Mitch McConnell even accept something like that or receive something like that?
That's an interesting question.
Because they support those protests in other countries, but not in Washington, D.C. No, we want to have that. Hey, what's going on, Ronin Black? What's going on, AL? So what's happening here is that the United States politicians are openly, saying, yeah, we support the protesters. Really? People losing limbs down there. You really support that?
That's what I mean. It's like, that's why, I didn't think it was much of a stretch, when the Chinese released the statement saying that, this is who they think is behind these protests.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they're not even like trying to hide it. They're not even like, we support democracy. They're just flat out saying, yeah, I support the protesters. But when it came to Black Lives Matter, when it came to hands up, don't shoot, all of a sudden they sent the military in to shut down people in protesting in
Ferguson, yeah,
in Ferguson, St. Louis. Oh, we have to, let the process work, the judicial system, and this and that.
And I mean, and a lot of them protesters are still coming up dead to this day, man.
Oh yeah. And when it came to Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, that was unacceptable. But when you have protesters in Ukraine and Hong Kong tearing things apart, you support that. I would be more interested in hearing what his wife has to say, Elaine Chao,
yeah.
Yeah, I'd be more interested in hearing what she has to say, because I can almost guarantee you, she opens her mouth, Chinese government is going to cut funding. Those nice paychecks.
That's almost a guarantee.
Mm-hmm. And now you want to dock your warships into an ongoing conflict? I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I'm not a part of the military or no the internal dealings. But I have yet to see a Chinese warship dock itself in Miami or in LA.
Only
I'm
thing I've
not
seen, only thing I've seen dock there, man, are cargo ship or cargo vessels. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Containers full of Chinese produced goods to be sold.
Mhm. Yeah, so the U.S. has a very strange relationship in all of this. Supporting all types of things. You know, when it came to Occupy Wall Street, they made sure to squash that thing immediately. So, all right, let me get to this next article.
Oh, why are you doing that? People might be seeing me posting some stuff there. This is some critical reading, man, to get more insight into the history of China and how it went from a lot of internal conflicts, and what's kind of molded and shaped them culturally to what's brought them into the fold where we see them today as a burgeoning superpower.
Mhm.
This reading list was was actually recommended by Scholar Chang. We had a real long discussion. I don't know if you remember that, Mike. That was like back in like late last year,
Yeah.
back in like December, I think, maybe November, December.
Mhm.
And yeah, this is something supplemental reading for the discussion.
Mhm. Yeah. Let me get to this next article from RT. Satellite pic shows more than 500 Chinese military vehicles in soccer stadium near Hong Kong border. Sa- Satellite images have reportedly captured more than 500 Chinese military vehicles stationed in and around a soccer stadium close to the Hong Kong border in what is believed to be a response to days of violent protests. The images taken by Maxer's Worldview Monday show the vehicles inside Shenzhen Bay Sports Center, a multi-use stadium normally used for table tennis, really, football and swimming in Shenzhen, across the harbor from Hong Kong. It is believed to be China's response to months of unrest, which has recently seen dozens of protesters shut down all flights at Hong Kong International Airport, one of the world's busiest. Chinese media disputes the claim, insisting the exercises had been planned beforehand. Flights at Hong Kong Airport resumed on Wednesday morning after violent clashes between protesters and police forced a 2-day period of closure. Military vehicles, APCs, military soldiers, PLA showing up. Um, I spoke with Nagone earlier this week, and we had this conversation long before you even decided to go live with this, and we made the decision to go live then. But we said, that the PLA is going to show up, and here you have this report coming out this morning saying, 814, saying, yeah, this is what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
I
if this is being aggravated by like MI6 and the CIA, man, like I don't think they're just gonna sit back idly. I think they may just come in and try to like put the stomp down on this real quick.
But how do you control 1 million people, right? You have tens of thousands of people that the police department in Beijing can't really in Hong Kong can't really handle. Um, you may have another Tenement Square sort of situation.
Yeah,
For those who don't know, Tenement Square happened in 1989, if I remember
89.
correctly.
Yep, I remember that. I remember watching it live.
Mhm. Yeah, so this is major. This is very much major. You have Mitch McConnell, you know, uh, you know, Mr. Creepy himself.
Mr. Turtleneck.
Oh yeah, you know, married to an Asian woman, a Chinese woman on top of that, and you know, saying, yeah, we support the protesters, but guess what? Little do you know, the PLA military Marines are waiting on standby. So what happens when you have U.S. warships saying, "Oh, well, by the way, we're going to dock into your Hong Kong ports while ongoing conflict is going"? Really, really, whose decision was that? Do you really think, for 1 second, that the South African or Nigerian Navy would be allowed to dock in Baltimore during ongoing protests about Freddie Gray?
Nope.
You really think that? You really think that they would dock their warships? You know,
They wouldn't have been able to get that close.
yeah.
They would have met them out as soon as they crossed into U.S. territorial waters.
Mm-hmm.
They would have been met with gunboats.
Mm-hmm. Well, not even gunboats. The Coast Guard would have took them down. But you know, when what's his brother from New York, man? Amadou. When Amadou
Diallo, yeah.
was shot multiple times, you really think that the U.S. government, DHS, would allow African African warships to show up, corvettes and destroyers?
Nah.
This is, you know, it's mind-boggling how some people think that this is okay, and that yeah, we're just going to dock our warships inside China and Hong Kong, and we hope to do this in the future again. I don't think so. You have a trade war going on, as well as lighting fires in our underbelly. I don't want to talk to you right now. I don't want to see your warships in my waters either.
Right, which they are there.
Yeah, if you got something to say, man, send me a text or something like that. Or put it on Twitter, but don't dock your warships in my waters and support the protesters. It's crazy. All right, let me get to this next article. Let's see if check my email real quick.
Christopher Clipper says this is a test run to Taiwan.
Really? I don't think so, man. I think Taiwan is a different it's a different case. Because they're Hong Kong doesn't have its own military, right? You have a police force, you don't have a military. But when you start talking about Taiwan, they have a full-fledged military.
Yeah, they got a full-fledged military. That's who we were talking about the arms sales going to.
Right.
To the tune of some billions. So, I mean, that's going to be a little harder to pull off dealing with somebody who got, who can clap back at you.
Mm-hmm. And they're pretty well dug in. You know,
Yeah.
they're not gonna they're not gonna take it on their knees. All right, let me fire up this next one. Hey, what's going on, Ryo? What's going on, Christopher Clipper? Rainy Woman, good evening to you. Wait a second. But Xi is pushing the envelope. You got to expand on that more, Christopher Clipper. I mean, it's their country. What did you think they were going to do? I don't think he's pushing the envelope. I think he already licked the back of it and stamped it already.
Right. Our whole point is that Taiwan ain't. I'm saying they got a military to clap back at you. They don't buy arms. They don't arm up like that, to get taken over.
Well, yeah. I think it's more defensive than it is offensive. I don't think
Right.
they envision themselves going into China and overthrowing the Chinese government. That would be a losing situation for them.
Right. But it wouldn't look good if China tried to go with Taiwan, trying to take them over. That's the whole point too. So it's a deterrent.
Mm-hmm. All right, just give me a second. System's going through an update right now.
No, you're good. Hey, by the way, dude, when you read that first article, man, the RT article, man, did you catch that picture of Sarah Silverman in blackface? I didn't want to say nothing, dude, because we was kind of just building on the topic, but I looked over like, holy shit, dude, what is that?
Yeah. It's something, man. It's something.
And yeah, Ryle, I mean, you kind of have to, man. The other countries they are gonna, they are rethinking it. Because it's a sphere of influence type of thing, and that we're seeing it firsthand. What Hong Kong, we were just talking a bit ago about why the people of Hong Kong are adamantly opposed to any sort of Chinese influence or coming into their sphere of influence, because the way they live will fundamentally change. So that's going to go with anyone else that where China's sphere of influence starts to reach into their realm. They're gonna feel that, yeah. And then there won't be so much like welcoming diplomatic ties, but it'll be more deterred type discussions and things that there's going to be a fundamental change to where we're going to say, hey, look, now we got to start to structure ourselves in such a way to deter any sort of influence, right? So then it's not going to be as welcoming of a type of interaction. So I mean, again, we just $2.2 billion in arms sales to Taiwan. You don't go and just spend that kind of money on weapons if you're not trying to send a message.
Yeah, and the thing is, no one really recognizes Taiwan outside of the United States and the other colonial powers, and that's on purpose. This is there's a system update going through, man. Damn.
Did that just drop off? I see we.
Okay, bye.
Yeah, Christopher Clipper. That's right. Primarily for the British.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of Hong Kong being a major banking and financial hub, and that's why the claims that a lot of these protests and stuff are on the low have been organized by MI6 is not much of a stretch.
Mm-hmm. Let me get my other computer. Shoot.
Sorry for the delay here. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we're getting that worked out right now. Let's scroll through the chat and see what else is going on.
Yeah, hit the like
Elise,
button if you have not already done so.
yeah, please do. Elise, glad to see you drop through. Rael, Conflictus, Richard, it's good, G. Ronan Black. Kareem Austin, what's good? Kurt Fields, you said something. Protesters coming up dead. Oh, yeah. It's real out there. Steve Technologies, Brooklyn Star, D. Felder, Ghana Warrior. What's going on, y'all? One Speed, what's good? iTuber 012. Interesting comments here. I didn't really see these. Let's see here. He's talking about the extradition bill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about the Chinese man from Hong Kong killing his girlfriend. Glad to see everyone drop through.
All right, let me see if I can pull this up.
I know, right, Royal? He said, seeing those Hong Kong protesters sing the Star Spangled Banner was unreal. Man.
Somebody's paying for this.
I ain't trying to put no conspiracy theorist hat on or nothing like that. But look, I'm just saying, man, let the Chinese tell it. Let the Chinese government tell it. They say, look, man, MI6 CIA got their hands all over this. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, can you see my screen?
Let me see here. Yeah.
All right. Let's try this again. All right, this one's from RT.com. U.S. House Foreign Affairs panel threatens swift consequences if China uses violence in Hong Kong.
Wait, Mike, hold on, because I don't see it on. There it is. I think there. Okay, there it is.
Yes, right. There's a slight delay with Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Any violence used against peaceful protesters in Hong Kong would be a mistake for China and will trigger a swift response. A Congressional Foreign Affairs panel has warned, insisting Beijing is responsible for the unrest. The ranking members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Chairman Elliot Engel and Michael McCall, issued the warning in a statement on Wednesday, drawing parallels with 1989 protests in Tiananmen Square that ended in bloodshed, also known as the June 4th incident. We urge China to avoid making such a mistake, which would be met with universal condemnation and swift consequences, the lawmakers said. The statement also made the case that no foreign powers are fomenting this dissent, arguing Beijing's policies are the root of the problem, and dismissed last week's meeting between Hong Kong's protest leaders and U.S. consulate official Julie Ide was who was simply doing her job. While it is not clear that Ide and protest figures discussed during the visit, the coordination with an American diplomat reminiscent of previous U.S.-backed color revolutions around the world has raised questions about Washington's role in Hong Kong's unrest. U.S. President Donald Trump warned in a tweet on Tuesday that Beijing was amassing forces along the border with Hong Kong, citing U.S. intelligence. However, the troops' movements were reported a day prior by the ruling Chinese Communist Party's own media outlet, which characterized them as part of military exercise. Responding to increasingly harsh statements, the Chinese Foreign Ministry on Wednesday said the United States should not stick their nose in our affairs and insisted that Hong Kong is a Chinese territory, not American or English. So they're putting their foot down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're putting their foot down here. But this is interesting because, well, you know, they're accusing China of using violence against protesters. Well, guess what? In America, during the civil rights movement, that's exactly what the United States government did. They used dogs and batons and bean bags and all types of things against their citizens of the United States, being American blacks of the descendants of slaves. They also had their, you know, violence waged on them from the U.S. government. I would be very careful if I was any U.S. politician or lawmaker stating that there should be consequences for other countries and how they deal with their people, but don't want to talk about how the U.S. government deals with black people.
Well, especially if you may actually be, behind the protests, right? You know, look, with the protests here, civil rights movement, Ferguson, and shit, all the other ones where it was black folks protesting injustices, right? I mean, look, it was the local and state governments that came down with the hammer. And trust and believe, them black folks weren't out there protesting because the Chinese propped them up to do it. There wasn't no foreign money behind that shit. No, those are people that were just like, look, we tired of getting our, we tired of you having your foot on our goddamn necks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this one right here, like I said, man, all signs kind of indicate that there is something underlying, the robustness of the protests, right? There's something is behind, someone is behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But if the government that's really trying to stave this off is looking at the U.S. like, yo, look, we see what y'all doing, and then the U.S. turns right around and says, look, there's gonna be consequences if there's hands on those protesters. You guys are interfering with democracy, and they start towing that line. It's like, yo, the nerve of you.
Yeah. And just imagine. I want to say it was Khrushchev, who was the president of the Soviet Union at the time, was talking about the civil rights movement from Moscow,
Mm-hmm.
saying, how brutal, the United States was. The West is how
Yeah.
they referred to him, how they were referring to him. And the great Paul Robeson even went to Moscow himself and had conversations with the political leadership of the Soviet Union at the time.
Oh yeah. Is it any coincidence why even today you find in 2018, 2019, and 2020, anytime there's a some sort of social meme, right? Okay, perfect example. Russian bots,
Mm-hmm.
right? Russian bots are always tied to any sort of social meme that has black folks being very analytical and being critical of U.S. policy. It's always the Russians behind that shit. Like, just let that one sink in.
And it's always somebody else that's up to no good, right? It's you have the United States with people on the ground in Hong Kong shaking hands with violent protesters, and you had John McCain before he died was in Syria shaking hands with jihadis who beheaded a 13-year-old Palestinian boy. The pictures are all over Google, if they're still there. There's even video of him on YouTube of him, doing the jig with with these terrorists over in Syria. How he got into Syria, I have no idea. But that's what was going on. And so I find it hypocritical and very interesting that they take these positions, and almost as if nothing ever happened. Back in the 60s and the 50s, nothing ever happened. There was no such thing as slavery. What are you talking about? That's a myth, right? It was indentured servitude. Know your history, right? So that's the sort of thing that catches my eye.
Hey, Mike, I think D's in the. Yeah, I think he's got his hand raised. Yeah.
Let me
I'm pretty sure D's got something to put in on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nikita Khrushchev. Yep, that's it. Christopher Clipper.
All right, give me 1 second.
While you bring him in, I'm gonna mute for a second, man. We'll go pack a ball real quick.
Yep. How come I can't get this brother on? Oh, promote to the panel. Okay. Shalom, DE.
I don't know if DE knows he's in there yet.
He might be getting his headset together.
Oh, okay. Wait, there he is.
Good evening, everybody.
Yo.
Thanks, Mike.
How you doing, sir?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good, good.
Man, you guys hitting the nail on the head today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. I don't know if you guys remember Tiananmen Square.
Yep.
Guess who was behind that one? You can't go into another man's country and fly the flag. Those guys were flying the U.S. flag, and they had a picture of was it a Statue of Liberty?
Mm-hmm.
They had built a picture, a Statue of Liberty.
And D, that's a psyop if there ever was one.
Oh yeah. But see, these things, it's the same thing they're doing. They're doing the same thing in Moscow right now.
Oh yeah, they're lighting fires.
I don't know if you guys are seeing that. Yeah, I don't know if you guys are seeing that. But
yeah,
they're doing that too.
Yeah, I wanted to cover that. I think you may have a echo feedback on your machine, D.
But that's.
All right, let me get to this article real quick. This one's from RT again. Beijing to U.S. Don't stick your nose in China's Hong Kong affairs. Why is this guy out there with a with a OSHA certified helmet and goggles and a mask? I don't get it. And he has the gloves too. Maybe he does construction, but I don't think so. China has rebuked Donald Trump for his Twitter conveyed alarm over the amassment of troops near Hong Kong. The U.S. should mind its own business and let China's domestic affairs be, it said. Zhang Hanhai, China's freshly appointed ambassador in Moscow, reminded that Hong Kong is Chinese and not American or English. He thus cautioned foreign nations not to stick their noses in our affairs, TASS reports. A similarly worded call to Washington to not get involved in Hong Kong came on Wednesday from the this is spelled wrong, Chinese Foreign Ministry, citing intelligence. U.S. President Donald Trump earlier tweeted that Beijing was moving troops to the border with Hong Kong. Everyone should be calm and safe, he wrote. That was hardly a secret, though, as Chinese media showed footage of the People's Armed Police moving towards the Shenzhen province bordering Hong Kong. The force, which is subordinate to the Chinese military leadership, is preparing for an exercise there, the Global Times reported. Last week, the civilian police conducted a drill in Shenzhen, which involved 12,000 officers, armored vehicles, helicopters, and amphibious vehicles, the paper reported. Hong Kong has been gripped by protests since late March, initially focused on stopping a now suspended bill that would allow extradition of criminal suspects to the mainland China. The protest has since escalated into an anti-government movement. There have been a number of violent altercations between demonstrators and Hong Kong police. So what you see right here is a picture of two Chinese millennials sitting down or standing up, for that matter, with U.S. Coast Guard Geopolitics. I think that's how you pronounce her last name. Giving instructions with this big pamphlet. I have no idea what that pamphlet could ever have in it, but it's pretty big. Beijing is highly suspicious of the Washington's role in the events. A U.S. diplomat was caught meeting one of the protest leaders, but Washington downplayed it, saying keeping in contact with various people was perfectly normal. Chinese officials said some members of the protests are acting like thugs and bandits rather than legitimate activists. In the Black community, a thug is a legitimate activist, at least according to the manosphere. D, you have anything you want to add to this?
Yep. Last week, the Chinese representative, who's the head of the Hong Kong government, came out in a flat statement. Says, now, the protests and violence will no longer be tolerated. All the time she was just letting them vent and cautioning them, what you're doing is wrong. Sit down and talk with the government. Don't get out there and cause damage and destruction. But then in one move, she says, this will no longer be tolerated. And from that statement, I knew that Beijing had decided, you know what, this has got to end. We're going to put an end to it. So you can expect that to be Beijing is going to act. They might not act today or within the next week, but when they act, it's going to be over with. Period. Everything is going to be. One day is going to be protesting and violence and everything. The next day is going to be just total calm. That's the way China does things.
And I mean, that's a scary thought. I mean, what takes place where literally overnight something this massive literally just ceases overnight? Like what kind of? Oh, I would say that I'm kind of afraid of the thought of what's done to kind of to do something like that.
Because the security police, China watches everything in Hong Kong, believe me. Even in Taiwan, there's always you see articles and people that Chinese are everywhere. Mainland Chinese operatives are everywhere. And China always watches. They don't get involved to a point where they might not act that you can see them, but they're acting in the background. They will see things and they report it. Nothing might be done about it at the time, but it's noted. And while these people are doing the things, it's like they're looking at all the leaders, all of their families, not just leaders. They're looking at families, wherever these families are, so that when they make a sweep, everybody gets taken. That's the way China does things.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, they have facial recognition cameras, and the phones actually track everybody as well, right? So their cybersecurity network, their internetwork is actually quite intrusive on its citizens. So they know it what their people are saying text wise, messaging wise, and voice wise. You can pick up phone calls and stuff like that. You know, I would you would be a fool to actually say anything disruptive that would get you arrested.
Look, I mean, that's part of the reason why the U.S. doesn't want Huawei here. They're like, y'all gonna, next thing you know, y'all gonna like secretly have, all these 5G phones and, data towers and all this, like literally collecting every single thought and detail of American life, right? Just dossiers on everybody and shit.
But we already do that. The
Yeah, but they don't want to be outdone.
The British and our other favorite partner are already spying on U.S. citizens because they've worked around the law that says we can't spy on U.S. citizens directly.
Mm-hmm.
There's one who,
because you have the right, you have the Fourth Amendment.
yeah, all of our satellite communications that is tapped in Britain, and all the other communications, the undersea cables, is tapped in this other country.
Mm-hmm.
So they get you anyway. But I saw articles in the China Morning Post the other day. It says that Chinese police now, when you go through certain parts of China, they're stopping people and telling you to open up your cell phone, and they're looking at what's on your phone. And they were giving the people in Hong Kong, they were telling people in Hong Kong how to get around this. You gotta have two phones. One that you have right there in front of you to hand to the police, and your real phone that you use, you had hidden.
Mm-hmm.
So they are looking at these people. Like I said, China is just taking this time, looking for whoever they see involved in this thing, and one day it's going to be over.
All right, let me see. This one is from AlJazeera.com. Duterte seen as selling out to China, says deputy. So now we're calling people sellouts. Philippine Vice President Lenny Robredo said citizens were worried Rodrigo Duterte was selling out to Beijing and called on the president to take a stronger stand to protect the country's sovereignty in the disputed South China Sea. Robredo, who is keeping her options open regarding the presidential race in 2022, said in an interview Tuesday the president had not taken advantage of the International Tribunal ruling that affirmed the Philippines' economic rights in a maritime zone also claimed by China. I understand why our new administration is more friendly to China, but I think there should be a clear line as far as protecting our territory and sovereignty, Robredo told Bloomberg's TV's Haslinda Amin in Manila. The president has made a lot of statements which gives a sense we are acquiescing to what China wants. The public is afraid, she said. We want to wake up one day and many of our territories are no longer ours. Roberto hopes Duterte will raise the ruling in his meeting with China President Xi Jinping this month and urge greater transparency in loans and deals in Beijing. I've seen her before. U.S. presence in the disputed waters is a source of comfort, Roberto added, but the Philippines should not rely on any foreign power. Friendships with both U.S. and China will be beneficial. Roberto is in the unusual position of serving as both vice president and the main opposition leader due to Philippines rules in which the president and vice president elected separately. Interesting. She has been on the receiving end of attacks from Duterte, whose critics have been jailed or ousted since he came to power in 2016. She says she was ready for the presidency, but would decide later on whether to stand as the opposition Liberal Party main candidate in elections 3 years from now when Filipinos will vote on Duterte's successor. So Duterte is seen as a sellout. for being friends with the Chinese, but you know, U.S. occupation of Philippines is quite all right with their military. Who's really the sellout?
And you know what's funny about that, man? I maybe like like 2 weeks ago, you know, so the government of the Philippines decided that what they weren't going to do was they were no longer going to accept like U.S. recyclables for processing.
Right.
And so them with along with I'm trying to remember, it's like two other countries in Southeast Asia. They basically started sending all of like the plastic and the cardboard, the paper. They started sending it all back here. So this stuff is starting to like accumulate. It's building. It's coming back to the United States and it's building up here. China's doing the same thing, sending all of the recyclable stuff that they were processing for the U.S. They're sending it all back. Like, take your garbage back. So you know, and it was pretty interesting what Duterte would what he said in the meeting. I actually heard him. He was saying something about like, yeah, take all your trash back, and you know, if you want, feast on it, eat it. Like he was like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he was talking hella greasy. So yeah.
Yeah, he's a real stand-up guy, if I must say so myself.
Yeah.
All right, let me get to this next article.
Sarcasm. It's what we do here at the Brain Trust.
Mm-hmm. China summons U.S. official over collusion with separatists in HKSAR. The Office of Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region on Thursday summoned an official from the U.S. Consulate General Hong Kong, Hong Kong and Macau after some media reports suggested that U.S. officials are in contact with so-called leaders of the separatists. The commissioner's office lodged solemn representation and expressed dissatisfaction and opposition, demanding clarification from the U.S. side. The Office of the Commissioner of China's Foreign Ministry, Hong Kong, said on its website, "We strongly urge U.S. officials from its Consulate General, Hong Kong and Macau to abide by international laws and basic rules of international relations, stop colluding with and sending wrong signals to violent separatists in Hong Kong, and stop interfering in Hong Kong affairs in China's internal affairs," the statement said. The Chinese government has accused the U.S. of fanning the flames and said there's proof. Back in 2013, U.S. whistleblower Edward Snowden said the United States National Security Agency has been hacking computers in Hong Kong and in the Chinese mainland since 2009. The U.S. never admitted to this. So what has the U.S. done since the Hong Kong protests broke out? In late February, Kurt W. Tong, U.S. Consul General in Hong Kong and Macau, criticized the HKSAR government for amendments to the fugitive bill. In March, the heads of opposition forces in Hong Kong visited the United States, lobbying the National Security Council, members of Congress, conservative think tanks, and the media to pay attention to the amendments. They also brought their efforts to the White House in a meeting with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. 2 months later, opposition leader Martin Lee visited the United States and met with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to discuss the fugitive bill. Pompeo immediately issued a statement saying the bill would harm the interests of the United States. Lee also participated in a symposium on the amendments organized by the National Endowment for Democracy, or NED. Oakley dokley. In mid-June, in mid-June,
Oh,
question.
shit. Oh, let me mute.
Smoke a bowl, man. In mid-June, U.S. Congress sought an amendment to the Hong Kong Policy Act. Some members proposed new legislation seeking to impose penalties on some HKSAR government officials. Also in June, U.S. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, publicly stated that Hong Kong demonstrators were a beautiful landscape and revised a bill that in the U.S. concerning Hong Kong. Then in July, Pence and U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton held meetings with Hong Kong opposition leaders. Hello? Is anybody listening out there?
I mean, dude, come on, man. What more proof do you need that there isn't some involvement by the U.S. over this stuff, man?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those are some pretty big names: Pompeo, Pence.
If you watch all of the protests, anytime you see some situation like that, watch how it begins and the people involved in it in the beginning, and you see that it is always set up like Iraq. You get the opposition in Iraq that they bring them to the U.S., talk to U.S. officials first, low level, then it moves into the Congress, then it moves up to the Secretary of State, and moves up to the president. You get those steps in every situation, and you can see that there was anybody who watched politics and watched diplomatic war in general. I mean, diplomacy in general, can see that this thing was organized through the U.S. Embassy in Hong Kong. And I wouldn't doubt if the British Embassy is coordinated as part of the coordination effort.
Man, bet on it, D.
No, remember the British came out and basically supported it. And that's when Beijing told them to mind their own effing business, because they were still going through Brexit.
Yeah, this was last week.
Oh, not last week. It was last month. It was in July.
Last month. I'm sorry.
It was in July. But yeah, this that article points to everything. Even Edward Snowden said that the United States government, national security administration, had been hacking Chinese computers since 2009. That was 10 years ago. What's to say?
Sorry, Mike.
No, what I'm saying here is you have evidence, you have testimony from a whistleblower.
But they had that capability with every Microsoft program and every Intel chip. They have the capability. I mean, they implant everything on Google, Facebook. That's a foregone conclusion. You have to, if you are a country like Russia or China, England, France, Germany, Brazil, that's what got what's the name in trouble. Because when it came public what they were doing in Brazil, she canceled her meeting with Barack Obama. And after that,
Dilma Rousseff.
Yep. After that, she was persona non grata, and they went after her. They even created evidence. Well, anyway, they went after her.
Jailed homeboy.
Yeah. So, and if you read some of the stuff that's happening in Brazil now, you'll see that they created evidence to put him in jail. And the prosecutor said, even though we created evidence, we're not going to let him out of jail. So, anyway, it's just, this is a thing that, if you are any country in the world, like I said, any Germany, for instance, France, you got to understand that the U.S. is going to be spying on you. At one time, the French were the biggest spy network in the U.S.
Man, it just came out that Facebook had interpreters transcribing Facebook discussions.
Yep.
It's not only on the U.S. population; it's everywhere in the world.
Well, but that's the point that the complex is making, that these private tech firms are actually working on behalf of the federal government. And then looking at people's text messages. I can only imagine what they're looking at in the manosphere. People human trafficking and making them sign contracts, and trying to have polygamous marriages and stuff like that. That's the type of stuff you're going to find in the manosphere.
And cannibals.
Yeah. Oh yeah, cannibals. People who like to cook people and stuff like that, eating with their gold teeth. Let me get to this next article. This one is from CGTN.com again. Beijing warns of terrorism as petrol bombs hurled in Hong Kong. A spokesperson of China's central government warned of emerging signs of terrorism in Hong Kong after some rioters hurled petrol bombs on Sunday night. Hong Kong's radical demonstrators have repeatedly used extremely dangerous tools to attack police officers, which already constitutes a serious violent crime, and also shows the first signs of terrorism emerging, said Yang Guang, spokesperson for the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office of the State Council. This wantonly tramples on Hong Kong's rule of law and social order. Wantonly, what an interesting term to use. One police officer.
I'm almost certain they didn't mean what that could be.
Yeah. Tu Wong Fu. One police officer sustained burns on both legs after being hit by a petrol bomb in Sisum Sha Sui on Sunday. And near Chuang Sha Wan, another officer was injured while chasing a bomb thrower. So, now you're talking IEDs. I mean, Hong Kong is known for fireworks. So it wouldn't be that much of a stretch to imagine that, yeah, these guys may start throwing M80s and quarter sticks of dynamite at any sort of government officials government law enforcement or military to go in there and suppress them. This can be really nasty. This is how the not Orange Revolution, the Arab Spring started out in Egypt, when when they wanted to bring down Hosni Mubarak. If you go back on YouTube and look at those protests, you see that's exactly how they started off. And the Egyptian military had to respond, and they were running people over with Humvees and everything else, and ambulances and fire trucks. So that's how nasty it got over there. So, if I was Beijing, I'd be concerned too, because you just had a U.S. warship decide, just as a heads up, we're going to be docking our warships into your conflict zone in Hong Kong. China's looking at them like, I don't think so. You should take a hike. Maybe, you're not wanted around here right now. And then you have Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell saying, yeah, we support, guys running around with IEDs, tossing them at law enforcement. But when it came to Black Lives Matter, it was like, oh no, you guys should go home and wait for the process to take place. Trust the process.
I mean, if you so much as had a bandana covering your face, man, you was a target.
Oh, yeah.
Never mind, like throwing shit at law figures that explode upon impact.
And you can take it back further. You can go back to the Black Panther Party, who had the right to bear arms under the Second Amendment, were being suppressed by the federal government. But here you have these same people from that era in political positions and diplomats saying, yeah, we support we opposition in Hong Kong, and we see nothing wrong with that. But we just don't want any sort of BLM protest in the United States. We don't want hands up, don't shoot. we don't want you guys recording us on video while we choke
we
Eric
don't want,
Gardner.
we don't want NBA players, wearing T-shirts that say I can't breathe.
Yeah.
We don't want NFL quarterbacks taking a knee.
No. Heaven forbid.
I mean, good God.
Heaven forbid you put your knee on the ground. You should be playing football. That's what we pay you for. Toss that ball around.
Didn't Trump say that you should be playing football?
Yeah.
You get paid to entertain.
Yeah.
And the guy from Texas come out and say, hey, the jail population is taking over. You know what I'm saying? That's but in China, I mean, Hong Kong is, I mean, serious. China is showing very real constraint in Hong Kong. I'm not kidding. The US would not permit, I mean, shoot. From the time the protests start, if you guys remember Wall Street, the protests under Barack Obama, when people came out and they built tents and they were protesting without violence.
Occupy Wall Street?
Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
No violence whatsoever. They sent in the police to violently throw them.
But what was funny, D, is because it was nonviolent, they tried to let it go for as long as they could before they had to pretty much do what typically is mandated, right? Like it was the optics. It was a bunch of young kids who just don't understand the financial markets, and they're expressing their constitutional rights to protest and express grievances, and then it was like, all right, enough of this shit. And then real quick, dude, they was out of here.
Well, they support the opposition. They being these U.S. officials support the opposition in Venezuela. Oh, well, we recognize him as a legitimate president. What's next? You're going to recognize, the leader of Hong Kong as a legitimate leader of mainland China?
Well, I was going to say they pretty much already de facto recognize the individuals that's been coming over here and meeting with the heads of state here. I mean, who do you think is going to be put in the positions of power once the transfer occurs? They're over here. They're over here discussing what's to come once the switch takes place, right? And then they're put into these positions. They're getting their marching orders. That's probably what that large packet of papers that we saw in that one article.
It probably wasn't anything of importance. She's probably playing.
It's probably just a picture, yeah.
No, it's probably playing Sudoku or some shit like that. Playing crossword puzzle or something like that. I don't know, man.
About to fold a bunch of paper airplanes.
Could be making some Chinese fans or something like that. Let me get to this one last article before we get into. Actually, I think we'll close it out after this. I thought that Scholar Chang would be here, but he's probably being watched by the Chinese government as well. This one is from CGTN.com again. China slams U.S. politicians as black hands behind violent criminals in Hong Kong. A spokesperson in the office of the commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region Wednesday severely condemned the violent acts of protesters against a traveler and a reporter at the airport on Tuesday evening, calling the U.S. the black hands behind these mobsters. Black hands. Surprised they didn't say Negro hands.
Well, you know where the black hand, where that comes from, right?
Explain it to the rest of the people.
Oh, well, the black hand is what they called, I guess you could say, like the first mafiosos that come from Italy that set up shop in New York. Yeah, they were called the Black Hand.
Some politicians, diplomatic officials from the United States have played a role of protector and spokesperson for these mobsters in recent violent acts in HKSAR. The spokesperson said, after adding that such irresponsible remarks made by U.S. politicians on Hong Kong affairs which confuse black from white and incited troubles will be condemned by all Chinese people, including 7 million HKSAR residents. The remarks were made in response to recent fallacies made by the U.S. politicians, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senator Marco Rubio. Violent crimes are continuously escalating in Hong Kong recently, with rioters taking extreme measures to paralyze the airport, smashing properties, and committing arson, besieging police stations, brutally biting off the finger of a police officer, brazenly throwing petrol bombs at police stations, and causing severe burns to a police officer, and even attacking police officers with large caliber, high powered shooting devices, said the spokesperson. I talked about this before, that there were 3D printing guns in Hong Kong. So, you know, they're talking about, you know, improvised weapons, which is what I was saying earlier. On Tuesday night, violent protesters surrounded and assaulted a traveler and a reporter at the Hong Kong International Airport and obstructed emergency staff from taking the passenger to the hospital. The anti-China forces that intend to destabilize Hong Kong should never underestimate our firm will and capability to safeguard the national sovereignty and security, and to maintain Hong Kong's prosperity and stability, the spokesperson said. Hegemonists will pay a heavy price if they act arbitrarily on the soil of others. Any illegal and criminal act will be severely punished by law, the spokesperson added. So, biting off fingers, 3D printed guns, IEDs being tossed around everywhere, stopping emergency responders, first responders from taking people to the hospital, people losing eyes, losing limbs, being burned, people being trampled, being run over.
It's real out there.
Yeah, it's real. You know, soy sauce on people's shirts, duck sauce in people's eyes. This, you know, this is serious business. This isn't like, I mean, what's to say that this, you know, this doesn't spread even further? Because you have, I always thought that Hong Kong had just 1 million people, but they have 7 million people up in that place. That place is so jam packed with people. How are you going to stop all these millennials?
What I'm saying, look, Christopher Clipper, yeah, because that's true too, man. Airports getting shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Hong Kong is bigger than most people think. You know, the area that you spoke about earlier, Sim Sa Sui, that's up close to the Chinese border. The city of Hong Kong is almost like an island. They call the whole thing Hong Kong, but if I don't know if you can look at some photos of Hong Kong. There is one. That's why they had to move the airport. But there's one area close to the airport that is probably about 1,000 high-rise buildings, and on approach, the airplane is flying below the level of some of the high-rise.
Wow.
So you you can look out, and the high-rise building is up above the air as the airplane comes in, and there's another area. Like the other area you talked about is on the other side of Hong Kong. You got to take the ferry to go over there. You can take the ferry to go to Sim Sa Sui too. And that's where the border was when you want to cross over to China. Like if you want to go in Shenzhen to do business, you can take the airplane to Hong Kong. If you don't have to fly to China, because Chinese flights into China is always delayed and canceled and all that. So you take the airplane to Hong Kong and take the train across the border, and that's what most businessmen used to do. Chinese still do that, still go that route, go into China. But Hong Kong is actually a little bit bigger than most people think it is. It's like similar to say that like Manhattan, and then you outline say Manhattan was totally populated, and then you got the Bronx, and, Brooklyn, and Queens where it's less populated.
Yeah, yeah. I figured it was about the size of NYC, totally. But what I'm saying here is this: the police department is not big enough to handle all of this protest, or what's considered to be protest. Now it's considered terrorism. They're using improvised weapons and improvised explosives. That these are now terrorists now, and they don't have the jail capacity to fill up their prisons with all these violent millennials. So you would have no other choice but to send the People's Liberation Army into Hong Kong. There is no other way to squash all of this violence. Because when you think about what they supported in Haiti, they supported Haitian terrorists to overthrow the prime minister of Haiti, or the president of Haiti. I think in 2004. As a matter of fact, they supported it multiple times, if I remember correctly. And this is all recent stuff. You look at Honduras; they supported the overthrow of the president there. Guatemala. So there's various areas of concern that the United States have had their hands in terms of interfering in the political affairs of other countries, but then they blame Russia for, allegedly interfering into the domestic politics of the United States, while they openly support the interference of the internal affairs and politics of Hong Kong and China. Make it make sense for me.
Man, the way it makes sense, is if we're looking at and just to kind of follow up on what we talked about last Friday on the economics hangout, when there was a discussion. I think it was Nagone, Chaos Reign, and Paul Bryant had an exchange about who could win a war, right? You got to look at these things as proxy maneuvers.
Mm-hmm.
Like this isn't just, it's not just, oh, they're just supporting protests. No. Like if you can create destabilization to the point where you're engaging the military of your opponent, then you're basically conducting proxy war at that point. And it goes in line with trade disputes. It goes in line with this is, we all have to look at this as like various gears, right, in one machine that's moving.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see any of this as like separate from one another. When the discussion was had about, well, who will take out who in a war, and Paul and Nagone were like, and I think even you were like, well, look, we don't know if the Chinese will win. We don't know if the United States will win. We don't know because you don't know the tactics.
Yeah, I wish Nagone was on right now, because other than myself and him, I don't know who else watched the John Pillager documentary that I got up this morning. That I posted. It's an hour and a half documentary, but it's very important that people watch it, because there's a lot of research that was done to put that documentary together. John Pillager hit that thing out of the stadium with that documentary. He even went into all the way into the 1950s. So I would talk about it now, but I don't know how many people in the chat has actually watched it to really understand the fundamentals.
I'm pulling up. I'm gonna post it in the chat. wait, here we go.
Mhm. Yeah, if you have not hit the like button as of yet, and you're just joining us, please hit the like button because this is very important to geopolitics.
Yep. Any in today's world, um, that's one of the things that I would advise any black man, whether you be American, Caribbean people, English,
Mhm.
um, African, especially African. Know your world politics, man.
Mhm.
Get involved, learn something about the economics of how the world is going, because it's no longer local. Serious. What was local in 1950s is now international politics.
Mhm.
And cyber.
Oh yeah. And the funny thing is that you don't have to pick up you don't have to buy a newspaper like Wall Street Journal or what's the other one in England, magazine like The Economist, or you can go online and get this. You got the information in your hand. I preach this to my kids. The best piece of equipment you could ever buy is in his hand, his cell phone. I mean, you can get information at fingertips. I mean, while it's happening, people are putting it up nowadays. People are putting information on Facebook while it's being, they're filming it while it's happening, and it's going directly. Yeah, Financial Times, Christopher, thank you. But it's going directly online, so you can see it 5 minutes after it's happening, 2 minutes after it's happening. You can get notified right away.
Mhm.
So get into these things. It doesn't take much. You know what I'm saying? You got 5 minutes a day. Just go through the headlines, pick out the best article, that deals with, say, Wall Street or the financial system.
Mhm.
And it will tell you what's going on in China, Russia, France, Germany, US, Australia, Brazil, because they're all tied together.
Yeah, I don't want to go too much into John Pillager's documentary because I don't think anybody here has watched it as of yet. So, but one of the things, the key points that he brought up is that the United States has military bases surrounding China from end to end. So over here, if you're looking at the screen, it shows the Marshall Islands. What's important about the Marshall Islands is that the United States did a lot of nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands in the 50s and 60s, and in the 40s and the 50s. Sorry, and they're using the Marshall Islands as a way to launch surveillance into China, but also use it as a launching pad. The CIA has their own intelligence center there. And then you take into consideration Guam here. So you have multiple air bases, naval ports for US military to launch an attack from into China. And then you take in Okinawa and the rest of the installations in Japan here, which is only an hour away from China. And then you have Taiwan, where they can launch an attack. No, that's not Taiwan. You have the Philippines, where U.S. military bases coexist here with the Philippine government. Singapore, as well, there's a military base. Thailand and they have bases in Thailand as well. And then you take into consideration the Indian Ocean, where they have the Diego Garcia. They have military bases that they use to launch attacks that they can use to launch attacks into the Middle East, as well as the Persian Gulf, as well as China. This is their fallback in case they need to, fall back from the Asia Pacific. And then they have the Middle East, which is CENTCOM. So the point that I'm making here is that with all of the conflict that's going on, trade wars and uprisings and terrorism inside Hong Kong, the Spratly Islands, the contested areas in the South China Sea, as well as Taiwan, for that matter. The United States has the Chinese completely surrounded. Oh, and they also have military installations in Australia, as we see here on the map at the bottom.
Mm-hmm, at the bottom.
So, I mean, this is what it's coming down to. That there's an coming war on to China. If you get a chance to watch the documentary, I urge you to do so. I don't want to talk about it tonight because Scholar Chang's not here, and neither is Nagone. But Nagone watched it 3 times already, and that documentary is pretty long, but he watched it 3 times already, so that's how good it is.
Hey, Mike, oh man is got his hand up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's in the attendee. And I will be right back.
Yep. Hey, D, you have anything you want to add to this?
Well, it's take for instance Diego Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
Diego Garcia, an island, or supposed to be an island, but a majority of the island is like, I don't know. I don't know if you've heard Andrews Air Force Base in Florida.
Yep.
Right. That they can land anything there. Anything that the U.S. has, they can put down on Diego Garcia. It's the same thing with Guam. You know, so they can reach anywhere in China from there. They don't really need all the other bases there, but the other bases are to say, well, here we are in your face, and you can't do anything about it. That's basically what it is to China. The Chinese are not really ready for a war with the U.S. I don't know if they'll be ever ready within the next, I don't know, 20 years or so, because to catch up with the U.S., they will have to dedicate so much of their resources to building a war machine, which the U.S. already possessed, and all the U.S. now is doing research into Star Wars type equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no longer like building for a land war where one country attacks another. It's like almost a space war. If you're in space, you're going to survive. Building satellites with people living out there, or living on the moon, or living on Mars, you're going to survive. If you're living on Earth in the next war, maybe 1 million people will survive if the war goes off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'll be one of the lucky few to survive. If the initial wave of weapons don't take you out, then you'll be the last one to get taken out by disease and wild roving packs of wild animals. You know,
Mhm.
people who that people who are just gangs. You know, to survive, you have to be in a gang, and even the people in the gangs are going to be fighting, eating one another. So you have to be. We as black people don't consider these things because we look at it as just a movie. You know, we see it. They show you in front of your face, and then you say, "Oh man, you watched that movie, and it was, you remember the guy did this and did it," and that's the end of the story. But they're telling you that's what's going to happen if there ever is a war. That's what the first. That's why they signed the nuclear treaty, because they know anytime a war goes off, it's the end.
Mhm.
And the U.S. is going out into space. Everybody, China is going out of space. India is going out of space. Every nation that has the capability is going out into space, and they're going out into space for survival. If anything survives here on Earth, they can come back.
Mhm.
But to survive, you have to be out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, you have anything you want to add to this?
Yes, yes. First and foremost, I would like to say, how you doing, everybody? Hello, Mike, DE, Ulysses. How you guys doing?
Shalom, bro. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom, brother. I'd like to say, there's this book that was written, I think, in the 70s or in the early 80s. It's called The Valley of the Dry Bones, and it's written by a author called Rudolph R. Windsor. Are any of you familiar with this book?
I
Yeah,
heard of it.
I read it.
You okay? You read it? Yeah.
I
Well,
have it in my library.
okay. Well, Rudolph R. Windsor, he's a professed Hebrew Israelite. So throughout most of the book, he uses biblical scripture and historical documents to prove who the true biblical Israelites really are today. But there's a chapter in the book in which he predicted this U.S. oncoming war on China. And he predicted that this would be World War III. And he spoke about, and this book was written again like around the early 80s, around that time, and he predicted about China joining forces with Russia in the Middle East and fighting a war with the US and the Western powers. So uh I know prior to me reading this book, I was not really aware of China's affiliation with Russia, but after I read the book, over the years, I've done more and more research, and I'm like, this guy, it actually, predicted things that's coming true today. So it's just funny how I'm looking at things today, and I'm seeing how things planned out.
Mhm.
And it all started with me reading a book that was written 30 years ago. Now of course I didn't read it 30 years ago. I read it about 10 years ago, but it was written about 30 years ago.
Yep.
So I'm just saying it's just pretty funny how things are just panning out.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the things that you
If you get
got,
if you get a
like,
chance, oh man, can you drop the link to that book from Amazon or wherever it is that you find it into the chat so other people can read it?
Yeah, yeah, excellent, cool. I'll do that.
Mhm.
one of the things that we have to look at, if you can go back in history and you see that the plan that you see in fruition today, what you are seeing today was planned back in the late 40s and early 50s.
Mhm.
The U.S. is considering bringing China into the world economic system that they had created since the 1950s. It was either going to be China or Africa, and they couldn't bring Africa in because Africa really didn't have they had destroyed Africa. And China was the one who had the educated people, the people who were easily trained to do what they wanted done.
Mhm.
China was given permission to get all the resources it wanted from Africa. But China didn't follow the program that they set up.
Mhm.
After they got into China and moved all the factories to China and all that, they found China now is progressing on its own path. The Chinese leaders making decisions that corporate that didn't follow the corporate plan that they had for China.
Mhm.
But it was too late now. So you can't control. They couldn't control the rise of China. So now this is what is the result of what's happening. And people have warned them about that because China has always been the people who kind of like went their way.
Well, they're the oldest civilization.
Well, not really, because South Africa, Southern Africa, have older civilization. Well, we going into history that most people won't understand. But Southern Africa had an older civilization than China.
Well, what I'm saying here is it's still standing on its own, right? China's civilization is still heavily present in regards to its modern institution today. I don't think we could say the same thing about Southern Africa.
Southern Africa, yeah, right,
Yeah,
correct,
it's not in position.
right.
It's not
China's-
the Wakanda. It's not the Wakanda that everybody would like it to be.
Right. Well, Southern Africa didn't maintain its culture like China did.
Right.
No matter what happened to China, the culture stayed Chinese.
Mhm.
It wasn't infiltrated to the extent of the rest of the world. You know, even the British moved in there, they drove the Chinese to stupor, and the Chinese still came out with their culture almost intact. So, and when you deal with Chinese culture, that's what you're dealing with now. Chinese culture, except for Hong Kong, and you can see what's happening there. The Chinese are people who will give up, who will defer decision making to the rulers, to the leadership. It's like the father in the house. You know, people will be talking in the house, and when the father walks in, everybody shuts up and wait for the father to give them permission to speak. And that's the way it's in China.
Mhm.
You know, all the rulership in China, if you go back to all the rulers in China, you see that they all have this rulership, this respect for it begins with the family and comes all the way up to the state, like the man in the house in charge of the family, and then the ruler of the state, the emperor or whoever he is in charge of the state. And whatever the emperor says, is right. But he has to surround himself with people who are people believe are making the right decision.
Mhm.
That's what Chinese culture has been for almost forever. And it survived against whatever was thrown at it.
Mhm.
So when you have that kind of situation, it's always going to cause conflict. Always going to cause conflict. Because even you might defeat them in a war, and the next time they're not looking at, they say, yes, we were defeated. Okay, we accept the defeat. But they're still tunneling underneath your house the next time. So that when you are looking out the window for them, they're actually underneath you. They're not coming at you the way you're looking for them to come to.
You know what's interesting is that the colonialists really don't have a true civilization history that they can focus back on, right? In America, white people can only go back so far before they realize who the real terrorists were. They didn't bring any of their culture into the North American continent where they can actually refer back to and say that, you know, this goes back 2,000, 3,000 years. No, it only goes back a couple hundred years. The United States is not that old of a country. It's only about 250 years old. As a nation state, So when you compare a nation state versus a civilization, that's where the conflict comes in. The nation state is butting heads with the civilization of another people. It doesn't know how to deal with that. And this is the problem that they had when they came into Africa, to the continent, that they didn't understand all these African tribes and all these African people and all these languages and all these cultural policies and whatnot. They didn't understand that. To them, it was stupid. Why do you need a pyramid? Why do you need, mosque and things like that? They didn't understand that.
And that's done through America, assuming that they're a civilization of their own, and their culture of their own, and their culture, which is adopted by other groups of people. They assume that it's the most superior culture in the world, where it's actually a bastardized culture. But let me give a correction. When I spoke about the book, The Vows of Dry Bones, to correct it, the book was officially published in 1988. So it was not published in the early 80s. It was published in the late 80s. Okay. So I just want to give that correction.
Yeah, it's not a big book. It's not a big book. It's a good night read.
Yeah. It only like $12-13 on Amazon, but it gives some good information. A small book like that giving some good information. You're not going to spend a lot. It's not a big book, and it only costs like $12-13. You know what? Shipping and handling, you still going to pay like what, less than $20 in total?
You might be able to find it at your local library. You don't have to pay for anything there. So I just want to make sure we close out. We'll probably have to revisit this coming war in China, because people need time to actually watch it. I did throw it up this morning because I initially forgot to do it the other day when we were having this conversation offline. That we want to actually focus in on this, because this is very important. If you have not watched the documentary, I just want to give a couple of snippets and highlights. The way they treated African slaves, they treated Chinese people the same exact way, bar for bar. You got to see the documentary of how Europeans came in the 1800s and the 1900s. As a matter of fact, 1900 itself, and dominated China, and did so much propaganda to break the back of the Chinese people. I don't want to give too many spoilers, because you have to actually sit down and watch it and actually take notes, because it's full of factual information that can be researched and pointed to what's happening right now, that this was bound to happen, according to the research. Yeah, so go to the community tab of the Black Brain Trust and look at the latest update posting that was posted this morning, and you can go from there.
And I also posted it. I also posted in the link in the chat as well. So on the playback, if you guys are checking this out, it'll also be in the chat box as well.
All right. Anybody else have any closing thoughts before we get up out of here?
To be continued, man. We're gonna follow this. I would say stay up to date with the Brain Trust. These aren't like just discussions that are had once a month or something like that. But we cover this. These news bits, these news items come into our feeds on the hourly, and we synthesize the information and try to bring it to you guys so that you can make sense of what it is that you see and hear in social media and all of that. So yeah.
All right.
One of the things that I like to point out is that you can, if you're on the Black Brain Trust for about 2 weeks, and you watch the articles that Mike talk about every night, or you will see how the connection goes between all these articles, and it will show you. Eventually, you'll see that there's a plan. Eventually, you'll see that everything is connected, and then eventually you'll see that you need to find your place in it and decide what you want to do next.
Mhm.
Because
All right. Thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button if you have not already done so. Share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including what we post on the community tab page. Check the latest update on that page so you can follow and watch the John Pilger documentary on the coming war on China. Very important documentary to watch, and very relevant to what we're discussing tonight about the uprising in Hong Kong. And we've already discussed an article that basically stipulates it's the United States behind this. Edward Snowden. Shout out to Edward, not Anderson, but Snowden, who basically revealed all this information about United States hacking into China and being part of the disruption. So with that said, we are gone. Shalom.